So David, you and I have been talking a lot about the challenges that have come from COVID with IT. We've seen it disable a lot of organizations suddenly. A lot of DR plans that they thought were in place were surprises. We've seen across a fairly large group of clients a lot of challenges, and there's so many commonalities between them. You and I had talked about sharing some of what we had seen in our customer base so that people can understand the difference between their particular challenges and trends. So today, as you and I talked, we wanted to really kick around some ideas about the trends we saw and then really walk through an approach that you've developed around approaching problem solving in a concise way that I thought was really interesting and I wanted to share with everybody. So you're the star of the show today. I'm Jeff Mullarkey, CEO for RKON. Maybe you can just kind of introduce yourself a little bit your background, and then we can kind of kick off the intro.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate the time today. So my name is David Wright. I'm managing director within our private equity vertical. I'm responsible for our PMO and advisory group. I'm new to RKON as an employee, but also I was a customer for about 15 years prior to this, and I worked for two very large prestigious organizations, Comcast and Pacific Gas and Electric out on the West Coast, who by themselves are no stranger to crisis and provided a lot of opportunity for me to kind of hone my craft and hopefully bring that forward to other customers.
Yeah, when we think about crisis management, I think PG&E has probably been at the top of that list for several months. So the timing is perfect. You and I were really kicking around this whole thing of what we had seen, and it was interesting, the trends. So our experience has been so much of IT investment has happened, and everybody's bought into this cloud enablement strategy that's supposed to deliver low-cost, scalable IT, compute from anywhere. But as you and I experienced, there was a lot of unexpected disruption. And the interesting thing that we had seen was in portfolios of private equity, it was hard to tell on the surface which ones were going to be successful and which ones weren't. They all had done great work, brought in various consultants to execute plans, and it wasn't obvious who was going to be able to execute and who came out of that. But the truth is, it disabled a lot of our clients. There was a lot of emergencies to respond to, both in security, operational uptime, even simple things like remote access. And it begged the question, you and I both heard quite a bit of, after all this time and energy, why aren't we further along than we thought? And it was a good question to ask, and I think it unsettled a lot of our clients that they couldn't tell from the board and from the leadership standpoint that the IT plan wasn't going as well. And in fact, a lot of our IT leaders were caught off guard that they weren't as far along as they think. And you and I talked a lot about the balance between there's a lot of good people out there that are working really hard. There's been a lot of good plans laid, and there must be some other factor here that needs to be taken in consideration with executing plans. So today's discussion, really, we want to walk through and kick around what we saw in the environment, and then end with kind of a diagnostic approach that you developed, and maybe we can kind of hit that first out of the gate and talk through what's different about that than just doing broad scale consulting plans that seem to have kind of fizzled out a little bit along the way. And so maybe we could start with that a little bit. I don't know if you want to kick off and talk about the challenges you've seen, or talk a little bit about the diagnostic approach and just kind of summarize what's different about that, so that we can dig into the topics a little bit.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. Yes, I think the first thing I want to put a point of clarity on is that organizations have actually had this issue prior to COVID, right? So using COVID-19 response as a reason to why you have a current crisis in your IT environment is probably a misnomer, a little bit misguided. Yep. In actuality, these issues have actually existed on the surface for quite a while. But the lack of maybe disruptions in organizations or areas or opportunities that have come up or distractions may have not necessarily had enough prevalence within themselves to show this problem. So,
Yep, that's right.
and so on the other side is also that organizations, like you mentioned, have invested a lot of time and energy into the plans, and what is actually highlighted is that those plans actually aren't being executed because of lack of discipline across whether it's organizational structure, whether it's process and procedure, whether it's actually adhering to those plans, right, and being distracted. So the good news is out there, if you have a plan, right, our diagnostic approach is really meant to get you back on track, also highlight the areas of priority. And I think that's one thing I'll continue to reiterate through our conversation is that without lack of priority, nothing that we can discuss or anything you discuss with other partners will actually help you, right? This goes back to, are you aligning to your strategic outcomes? Have you measured yourself on your objectives and your key results? And do you have a focused discipline within your organization to knock those out? Probably find if you actually take some of the strategic initiatives and complete them, that you actually probably will take care of some of the challenges you're having under the surface.
Yeah, good. Couldn't agree more. So, David, why don't we spend a few minutes talking back and forth about the actual challenges that we saw that were in common? Because a lot of people listening to this, a common thing is, well, I've just had these challenges. It's my staff. It's my, our plan wasn't good, whatever it is. And you and I have had an opportunity to see big trends across the board. And I think one of the values are helping everybody understand it's not just them. These were widespread. There was such a large portion of our accounts that were impacted that it can't be written off to bad plans, bad skill sets. These are good people with good plans, but it was so much in common. So why don't we dig into kind of go back and forth on things that we saw. What were some of the things that you heard from our customers in your interaction over the last couple of months?
Absolutely. Yes, I think a part of that was focusing on the lowest common denominator, which is it's the people of the plan, right?
Yep.
And that's a pitfall that we want to try and avoid. The blame
Right.
of the who,
Right.
versus going back to the what and the why, and really ensuring that you're making sure and ensuring that you don't focus on what something easy to go after is, because that's the thing's front and center, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it.
In other words, don't just get rid of your IT folks who've been working their behinds off and probably under a lot of stress. There's probably a bigger answer here than people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, amen.
Absolutely. Yeah, so a lot of that that we're looking at is during these times of crisis, a lot of organizations fundamentally don't actually know how to align around crisis management, or they move into a very unstructured approach when it comes to organizational. Just think about a lot of organizations how they manage outages, right? There's supposed to be a simple process for triage, isolation, communication. That isn't just limited to operational incidents, right? You can always take that approach and apply that to a command structure of sorts, right? So what that helps you do is get clarity, right? Who's got control? Who's got ownership? What are the tasks and the actions that we're going to take against that, right? But unfortunately, some of that organizational discipline got lost because organizations say, wow, we now have versus an IT or an individual incident, right, that maybe impact organization, right? COVID or the concerns that we've had have represented a multi-function, multi-organizational concern, which a lot of organizations aren't necessarily prepared for. So
That's
one
right.
is lack of organizational clarity and process where it's needed, not undue process.
Yep.
A lot of companies are probably over-rotated in process, implement a new process for the sake of it for no necessary reason, and what that's done is encumbered the organization with probably a layer of complexity they never had before. So I would say that's the first area.
I totally agree, especially in the mid-market, that, because they have a fault or something happens, they overprocess stuff, and like you said, they distract the organization. I want to ask you, things that we saw, right? People couldn't get access to data. They might have gotten access to their email, but they couldn't get to their application. Simple things like remote access was so overloaded that they didn't have enough people to get in. And I wonder, how much do you think this was because everybody planned, DR is a tough thing to do because it takes a lot of money, a lot of time and investment. And IT is changing all the time. Most of these organizations are in a constant state of transformation. So DR is always lagging behind a little bit. And I just wonder, we always thought of DR as a 1 or 2 day event. How much do you think that this COVID thing essentially became an extended DR, impacted just people's realistic readiness on this.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it is, right? So COVID's become an extended bit, and I like to call it business continuity plan.
Yeah.
Because unless you were actually physically, I know there's been a lot of organizations, sadly, that have been impacted and detrimentally impacted, by this. It is an extended business continuity plan. Unfortunately, a lot of the organizations, especially DR plans, are only tested to certain levels.
Right.
One biggest level that they miss is continuous the business engagement.
Yes.
What they account for is the technology replication, disaster recovery elements, but what they don't do is the business functionality, the regression, and user acceptance of those actual. And so a lot of the challenges we've seen with our customers is that, yes, we have a DR plan, but we didn't test the business functionality. Well, then when you test and really regression test against that business process, right, like remote access is actually a business process.
Yeah,
right,
that's
to
right.
facilitate that. Then you figure out that, wait, we might have configured the firewall rules as an example for internal data access, but we never actually thought about that for external.
Right.
So now you've got a whole mass of people working remotely from different entry points to your network, but you never thought about the fact that your access to data sets will be coming somewhere else. I'm just giving you a very kind of low-level example, but I think from a disaster recovery, it's a lot of companies are going to be going back now assessing the fact that they actually need to map it to some sort of business impact analysis to how the services that IT provides actually map back to business processes, and they've thoroughly tested those.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. You kind of brought up security indirectly through firewalls. How much do you think people got caught off guard that they always thought of security as when you're in the office, and now they're remote, right? We heard that, and we've seen so many break-ins in the last 90 days. Ransomware, FBI reported 400% increase in ransomware break-ins, and what do you think the driver behind that is?
Absolutely, and those results, by the way, are probably not why they're staggering. It's not a surprise.
Right. Yeah.
I think we've done a couple of webinars and have some content pieces with our colleague Christopher Henke, our CISO, and it's really about opportunity and understanding that because you've now basically changed your pivot point or your entry into the network. Let's face it, your home network, for the most part, unless you're a sophisticated user, is nowhere near as secure as your corporate network.
Right.
That's why basic things that come into like phishing, right? Looking at anti-malware patterns, not responding to emails that are outside of your safe sender zone. Do you even have passwords on your Wi-Fi network at work? These are all basic things a lot of folks don't think about, especially if you're not an IT user, right? But that was taken for granted. But obviously now, right, bad actors are looking for those pivots and are taking advantage of the fact that you've noticed now, say you had 10 offices in your environment and you have 1,500 employees, you have 1,500 offices. Your landscape has grown dramatically, and protect, detect, and respond to that has become increasingly more difficult.
Don't you think it's shifted organizations' focus on how they really think about security instead of the firewall security? Now we really need to think about the individual's security, right? We have to secure wherever they are. They have to be secured, and it was so easy before because they all had that central choke point, and we just bar up the door there and we're good to go. Now it's the Wild West. I mean, think about so many break-ins started from email, right? Microsoft has been a great tool, Office 365, but it's exposing exactly what you just said to hackers, and now simple things like, not to get into technology, two-factor technology now, MFA become table stakes just to operate because we no longer conceptually control security. How much do you think that goes in, and what kind of challenge do you see for organizations that have compliance-driven requirements or customer requirements, right? There's been so many break-ins, it's created paranoia in our customers' relationships with their customers. Now they all want to be validated. How much of that did you see? And
yeah, quite a bit, Jeff. I mean, a lot of it was around, again, I talk about operational discipline and organizational alignment. It's very quickly to see, again, when you've got highlighted pressure points, how weak or fragile those can be. As an example, I hope that our listeners recognize that security concerns aren't created by security. Security practitioners by themselves, standalone, with no inherent other pressures, are usually quite standardized and well leveraged. It's when you have bad operational IT discipline issues, right, with your change management, your service management policies, the way you react to your user behaviors, lack of user education and awareness. These are all things that contribute to your security posture being stronger or more vulnerable. A lot of that also is understanding that a lot of companies figured out those network insight projects they overlooked, whether it be managed, security incident event management, or basic telemetry, isolation, right? All of a sudden those become critical because again, your choke points are now decentralized. And so now you have data points all over the place and you really can't see where you are. I think it also, Jeff, to kind of wrap this particular piece up, it really fundamentally highlights one area. The edge has always been moving when it comes to security.
Yeah, that's right.
And it really questions why we continue with legacy security patterns of trying to protect a device and an asset when you really should be focused about two things. What are your crown jewels and what are your exposure points? It's your data and it's your people.
Yeah.
Right? And those are two areas I think that now we've seen our customers kind of shifting patterns to saying, let's protect our crown jewels, let's protect our data, right, which potentially are, and then let's look at our most vulnerable position, which is our people, right? Insider threat, malicious actors, or even unintended consequences of things like I mentioned earlier, not being educated or aware of the privacy issues and what you can do has an impact on your security.
Yeah, good, great point. You had come from a cloud background. You helped PG&E with their cloud initiatives, and you really have some great stories around that. One of the things that struck me with the outages and the challenges around remote was a lot of organizations discovered that they had cloud initiatives, but their mission critical application never made it to the cloud. And so that was the idea, right? The one thing that they wanted to get in the cloud they could access from anywhere was the thing that got left behind. Why did that happen in so many cases across our clients where those legacy applications never made it to the cloud? So they're kind of in these hybrid IT structures that disabled them from an access standpoint. What are your thoughts? You obviously saw that at an enterprise standpoint. We've seen a lot of that in the mid-market.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the earlier question that we asked. Organizations, were they outfitted or kitted out with a plan that they just didn't follow? And cloud is no different to whether it's an application rationalization effort or an ERP rationalization about validation or an uplift of another supporting system. Right, the cloud is a journey. I think there's also a misnomer that it's easy. You can quickly swipe a credit card, get online, and off you're away. That's actually a really good way to get yourself into a COVID type crisis situation. Yeah. There are a lot of non-technical steps you can get to a cloud journey transformation. And what we're finding is that while it was great to start up a cloud environment to maybe offset or get to speed to market or offset some on-premise capital investment and you need a quick turnaround, it might be fine for one or two. As you start growing the environment and trying to scale that from a cost, operational controls, procedures, even security and governance, you very quickly find out that those missteps, right, are starting to bite you. It's amazing how many areas within the clouds are actually unsecure and vulnerable just by the default settings that you kind of get out of the gate. And I think that there's an assumption that the cloud is inherently secure, and it is, right? The cloud providers make the cloud secure.
Right.
But we as the users of business have the security of the cloud, or in the cloud, I should say.
Right.
They have the security of the cloud, so they will protect, right, their environment. Right. But whatever user A does, that one switch, that one toggle, to get whatever they think their business outcome is, inadvertently introduces security risk. So part of this is going back and actually doing assessments, helping customers with assessments to actually go measure their current footprints.
Right.
And not from the technology perspective, but from the process. We look at how well are you operating it? Do you have visibility into your environment? Do you know where your costs are going? The cloud very scarily it can become a quick Ferrari out of control and down the lane, and you've left it behind. Next thing you know, you're looking at escalating costs, and you have no idea where they're coming from.
It's a great topic because the theme of the story is how do we create excess? How do we quiet IT down so that progress can be made? And I think that was one of the common things that we saw were the plans kind of stalled out in the middle because as they started launching these initiatives, they got noisy and expensive, and it chewed up all the extra time and money before they could finish those things. And the cloud FinOps, as you would call it, with out of control costs. How common is that?
Yeah, it's very common. Again, because going back to the basic things I talked about from the discipline, right? There's an order, a set priority of order of things that you need to achieve, right? Kind of cloud readiness, right? There's a you hear terms like, oh, we're in the cloud and we're working DevOps, right? But then you actually dig under the surface and you found out they're actually doing nothing but their traditional operational procedures. Nothing has really improved. The business is still not getting what they want in the time frame. You want to talk a little bit, going back, I kind of skipped your question around, why are organizations still leaving the legacy, their core applications behind?
Yeah, right.
And the story was leading through because of that lack of progressional improvement on the journey, right? And versus trying to get after kind of quick wins and hits, and then again, you go back and you forget what you originally started in the first place. There's an over-assumption about what you can do out there as well in the cloud.
Talk a little bit about it, because I think that's, we've seen a lot of people with really good plans and good people try and execute them, but they hit these little brick walls that don't seem like big deals up front, but they stall out the whole initiative, and they end up getting very distracted supporting a legacy footprint and a cloud footprint. And these in the mid-market, you have limited resources, you don't have the depth. It's tough enough to make one work. Once you get half in and half out of the cloud, now you essentially have to maintain two environments, and it really takes up all the excess time to actually move forward. Getting past that hump is critical, right? And we see everybody stalling, or so many stalling out at that transitional stage. And what are things that you've seen that are common? What are your thoughts around that how to break through those things?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about a little bit, again, the assumptions that it's a simplistic kind of turn it on and off you go, right? And it's, it can be farther from the truth. The cloud journey and the operations of the cloud are a big organizational change management effort, right? There's a lot of culture change, a lot of behaviors. You mentioned legacy and new. Yep. Actually, quite frankly, we found that organizations actually have both in the cloud. What they've done is because they've lifted and shifted their legacy assets, but they've also lifted and shifted the legacy processes and controls. And then, so what they've done is now move those bad habits and behaviors, and they've just moved them to the cloud at a faster pace.
Yeah, and with double the cost.
Yeah. Right. So I think a lot of that is also understanding how do you want to operate. So again, it is the people, the process, and the tools, right?
How much do you think that this cost and the stalling out of the initiatives has impacted IT leadership in the mid-market and the confidence that the board has in them, right? They have good plans, they get to these points, costs are higher, they don't have the operational efficiencies, COVID exposes all these problems, and there's this general loss of confidence on what's really a tough job to begin with, of the financial leaders and executive leadership in terms of IT's ability to execute. And it's a little unfair based on the position. I mean, what they're trying to take on is really a hard thing, and you've got to get that journey exactly right in the right steps. You take one leap forward and it just becomes kind of a runaway train. How easy is it for you, having gone through this journey and seen so many, to identify those stopping points and those lessons learned? You had to do this at PG&E at an enormous scale, and how easy is it for you now that you've gone through that to identify those stopping points so that people aren't treading on those?
There's definitely lessons learned. I would say, even though and it was obviously far from easy, and I was fortunate enough to be able to have a 2-year lead up into actually significant mass being grown, in order to be able to grow an organization from relatively immaturity, from a few people in a leading function, right? Understanding what behaviors are going to change, how we're going to operate, and leading up to a fully developed business plan and investments, and then obviously buy-in from the executive team. A lot of organizations unfortunately don't have that kind of timing as well.
That's right.
But that being said, even with all that lead up time, then there's an expectation, well, you've been at this for a while, kind of show me what you've been doing, right? How quickly can we transform our business when it comes to that? And by the way, technology alignment isn't just based on, cloud isn't just about technology alignment. Also, the cloud is just enabling something else that you're trying to figure out what that is, whether it's, like I said, faster speed to market, getting data in the hands of people that can make decisions. Specifically in organizations today, especially in the mid-market and private equity, depending on where they are in their deal structure, they're looking for data and data insights into what they have today. All right, do they have a product that's differentiating themselves? Do they have visibility into the operational and business financial data? Sometimes data sets aren't even aggregated enough for them to make a decision. Sometimes people can't even get access to their financial information,
That's right.
right, to make these. So when you look at those are all solutions that are perfectly enabled from the cloud. But again, go back to what we're saying, if you didn't enable, right, your cloud platform, your platform of choice in a modern, scalable, secure, affordable, and reliable way, those products are only as good as the first outage you're going to have,
Yeah,
right? And then now you're chasing yet another issue and another operational concern.
Yeah, now you've added complexity and distracted. You know, I want to pivot a little bit and talk about PE world, right? Speed to execution, timing of the deal cycle. The crisis has, in some ways, created opportunities for private equity to move forward on certain things once we get back to some state of normalcy. It's also changed a little bit of the direction on how they view the assets, and we've seen a lot of, frankly, emergency money spent. I don't want to put panic spending, but we were all in a panic, right? Everybody had to do something to make operations work suddenly. There's a fear out there in portfolio and private equity leadership that this is going to create a wave of investment that, you know, we're throwing good money after bad. So, you know, how do we, you know, there's a lot of concern about smart spending right now. We talk a lot about that. What's bad spending? What's smart spending? And everybody's trying to put the brakes on at our clients and portfolio and private equity world to say, okay, before we carry this any further, we got surprised, and everybody got some surprise. How do we make sure that we just don't throw band-aids on what we just discovered and have smart money spending? How prevalent have you seen that in your experience? And, you know, give me some thoughts around that topic.
Yeah. Obviously, like I said, any reaction to a specific crisis or event is going to drive some potentially bad decisions.
Right.
But with the thought process that our approach is we're trying to highlight the fact that if you had a plan, this is actually this is time to be unwavering about it, right? And specifically when it comes to kind of smart money, what we're seeing out of the gate is that there's an immediate need to be able to go right to the cost cutting exercise.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that without a good, thoughtful process of how you're going to do it, you know, maybe it becomes a one-trick pony, right? It gives you instant gratification, but it potentially has impacts down the line.
And on that point, we've seen obviously this reaction. There's a lot of businesses that have gotten in trouble from a revenue standpoint. We've seen them go to internally and say, we want to cut costs across the board. It's been difficult for IT to even come back with cost-cutting ideas for this very reason. They're like, well, you know, if we're going to cut costs, we might throw an initiative away that we kind of given birth to over the last couple of years, and we're going to throw a couple of years worth of work away on something. So, you know, I think that this is tying back into your diagnostic approach and how to pinpoint that pain and shortcut what is smart money. You know, this is, you know, I think this is why you developed this shortened process, right? Because what are we hearing from our clients? They want quick answers. They want executable things that they can do within their capabilities, and they don't want to spend a lot of money on consulting studies. So they probably already have good plans, but this is a lot around, you know, what you developed and how to pinpoint that pain and get them to move forward and get back on the right direction without letting the wave of you know, the emergency carry you into new waters that are going to create additional complexity. I mean, tell you those things and what your thinking was when you developed this approach.
Yeah, so this really starts to become a total cost of ownership conversation.
Yes.
If that's not top of mind, right, as a CIO within, you know, these organizations, right, it should be. This is really saying, you know, from overall operating budget in general, capital or expense aside, what am I getting for that? What's the entirety of my organization doing? If they all put their oars in the water together, row together, we can do some great things. But are we doing that? So one is understanding and qualifying that you have either understanding your total cost of ownership or you don't. Second is actually isolating your opportunities where the smart spend is going. And smart spend not necessarily isn't brand new, Jeff. It could be existing.
Right.
Some of the things that we look at from a diagnostic perspective is, what's your, let's start with sourcing. What are you sourcing? How are you sourcing? Do you have duplicity in your environment, right? Do you have overlap? You'll find a lot of companies actually have about, you know, 80% of their spend with 20% of their vendors.
Yes.
20% of their spend with 80% of their vendors. right? That's called eliminating the tail. How do you get rid of that tail spend?
Yeah.
You know, and in some mid-market companies, say, you know, you've got a healthy budget, say it's a $7-figure budget, you know, a 20% elimination of the tail adds up to be some significant dollars. That's now capital or expense that you freed up to do something else, right? To maybe spend on kind of crisis response. So that's one. Are you actually getting the value out of the things that you signed up for?
Right.
What is your contract strategy? What is your vendor strategy? You know, a lot of folks think that you go from, you know, an on-prem system to the cloud or to a SaaS contract, but yet you haven't fully, and you're in year 2 of a year 3 contract, but yet you're only 20% deployed. That should be an alarm bell going, hang on a second, I'm up on this, you know, 2 or 3 year subscription, but you haven't done anything internally to actually deploy. So those are the things that we look for as well. Are you actually, one, leveraging existing investments to actually benefit yourself? That's a sure, easy way of being understanding, one, without having to bring net new money in. Do you already have money that's sitting there, or just going out the window that you're not looking at?
How often is there money just sitting there that's either been misspent, trying to stretch on an initiative that you're not going to get to, that can be redirected to accomplish goals today? I mean, how often do you see that?
I see a lot of it. Unfortunately, it's not easy, necessarily visible out of the gate for people to find it.
Yes.
It could be embedded. It could be embedded in the cost of labor.
Yes.
As an example, there's obviously reasons why you capitalize labor, why you don't, etc., or how you actually triage people. But that's where a lot of the hidden costs are, right?
Yeah.
You know, I know tongue in cheek I say, you know, your average person's working 40 hours a week, right? But that's what you see on paper. What do I get for the 40 hours?
Right.
How we're doing them? I've got my employees on the most effective work that's encouraging them to do a better job, right? Or is it kind of shift left, right? Very meaningless work that you can ultimately operate and source out to another person. So you really have to understand the operations of what you're doing, what your people are working on, and then where all the burdens and the overheads are kind of contained. The other one is your delivery, right? In general, look at your projects. How many projects are overrunning? How many carryover projects do you have?
Right.
I don't know if you measure on a quarterly basis or annual basis. You know, a lot of companies don't actually measure that, and then you actually take a look and you go, wow, I've been missing dates left, right, and schedule, left, right, and center, and yet, right, there's really no repercussion or really understanding, right? Lost benefits on an IT project may not necessarily be easy translatable, but if you go ask the business, right, there's probably a business outcome on what they're missing: lost generation or revenue generation, subscriber growth impacts, market loss, right, from a vertical perspective. So I think it really challenges IT leaders to look in different areas that they weren't looking at before, and really get a seat at the table and ask business level like questions versus typical IT.
Yeah.
And notice I haven't said anything about spending extra money.
Right, that's right.
And this is what I help them for.
That's right. I thought that was interesting, and there's a lot of concern, right? We've gotten pulled into a lot of projects very short order, and the first things we hear: don't throw a 3-month consulting study to map out my roadmap. I want to know why I'm stuck on the current roadmap. And I think that's the delineation between a standard roadmap discussion and your diagnostic. It's we're pinpointing into the pain, and how and I asked you to kind of walk through that today, which is the second part of this, is talking through the diagnostic approach. But just to give a little more color. How can organizations be confident that you're going to be able to do this quickly, identify really what's in the way now in a more pinpoint fashion? What is the difference between the approach, how you would approach this versus doing a roadmap, a 3-year roadmap?
Yeah, I mean, we're focusing on what is front and center, and I guarantee if you poll the business or technology users, very quickly within a short ideation session. So an ideation session is just really, bringing those closest to the work, right? Understanding from their perspective where their pains are, and then quickly kind of dot voting or plotting them out to very quickly see the heat spots. From there, right, the diagnostic is almost semi-formed at that point. It gives you something known in kind of agile and lean terms as a value stream map. It kind of shows you what's beneficial with low impact or low cost, or what's highly impactful with high cost, and you kind of very quickly see what the initiatives are. From there, the approach is that you can isolate them down to 3 or 4 areas. I think that's really important.
Yes.
We're not here to tackle the entire organization.
Right.
We've mentioned that most companies already have a plan. What we're looking at is which ones have the highest value and the lowest cost to achieve, and the highest, most significant business impact. Right. And then very quickly there, right, if we're familiar with the law of diminishing returns, you can only get a few things done, 2, 3 max. They need to be focused priority. They need to be swarmed at an organization, and you need to take the best of your organization that are the most passionate about it, get that done, and then you can move to the next set of things that are in the backlog.
Yeah.
And that's the secret of the diagnostic. And our rotations are really based on sprint efforts.
Yes.
2-week collection periods at a time. And the approach is that you find what you've got, you retrospect, you reflect, you put an action plan together, and then you execute. And there's iterative nature around it. Very quickly you see results that you're not waiting 6 months to get, but you're also focused on a few priority initiatives at any given time, based on what the team and the people have recommended versus what necessarily IT leadership or leadership in general has. Because quite frankly, we can make some of the wrong decisions based on a perch from high above. This is really about working with the people closest to the work and enabling them and empowering them to work on the priorities. And very quickly, our framework, our diagnostic does that. It does hypothesis of what we think is broken. We quickly then find a few areas of opportunity. We deep dive those, make sure the benefits realization that we think is applicable to them. We test it out from a quick pilot or POC, and then we move that into production.
Yeah.
And in essence, Jeff, that's the IT diagnostic approach, and it's very quick, and it's reflective too. And then very quickly, if you make the wrong decision, with limited impact or limited cost, you can bail out.
That's
and
right.
To the next.
And which is the key,
and
that's going to happen.
I think that's the key.
One of the things that came from the emergency was a more targeted, like you said, sprint approach towards breakthrough accomplishing things quickly. So there's been a benefit because it's gotten everybody to shift from this, we're going to move the ball slow to, this is a series of sprints, and moving through change in an isolated way quickly actually delivers better results. We've seen that already. The other thing that we've seen is an increase in confidence from the stakeholders, the executives, the board members in IT, because they're able to accomplish something, and it's more tangible for them, right? So we see a restoration of confidence once you've been able to accomplish a couple important things in a very short period. It resets the cadence and the partnership that a little bit has been broken by the crisis and the ensuing fallout from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the confidence to actually be able to portray and qualify and then quantify what you're actually doing in cycles that you can quickly articulate upwards, right, to your executive sponsors, absolutely critical, Jeff.
Yeah.
Our approach also enhances the need for collaboration and communication.
Yes.
Part of
that
this,
aren't talking anymore.
Yeah, this isn't about us going away for 3 months, hiding, come up with results. It's
That's
about
right.
having open and honest conversation about transparency. A big part of this is also safety and trust. If you can't create a culture of openness where information can be readily shared, that the final product is okay not to have, but you're seeing progress and movement, I think those are the essential parts of it. And I think that's where openness, transparency, the doors, I think you'll find that most people want to work in that format.
Yes.
And so our approach lends itself to that.
Yeah, and an enablement approach versus somebody consulting, just I'm going to take the wheel and I'm going to drive it for a while, and that really is not the core of your approach. Using the team with their strengths as is, adding where it needed to accomplish things in a shorter order, I think is one of the keys. So, any other thoughts about what makes this different, or broad thoughts about how this approach matches into the fallout of the crisis and what we've seen?
Yeah, ultimately, it enables you as organizations. These artifacts are left behind. Right? The intent is not only have we actually got to the core of some of your areas that are concerning you as an organization, we've actually remediated some of those issues, but we've also left you hopefully with a better way of working, and so you're helping yourself.
Yeah.
And you're also then seeing what's important to your organization and what's not. And so the key takeaways is very quickly saying, these are areas that are just not focused on impact, and hopefully then realizing, going back to kind of consulting, isolating your third parties, your integrators, RKON ourselves happens to always show up as well as, by the way, we think you can do this better with us at a better price point, right, from a better risk posture perspective. And by the way, why it's important, it's not essential for what we do. We want to move our focus to essential services for what we believe is our core of business, and let partners like RKON focus on what we believe is important, right, but something that is better for us to do versus them.
Great. I don't have anything else. I thought that was a great tee up, and I know we're going to walk through the diagnostic approach in kind of the next part of this. So thanks a lot for your time today. This was a great discussion, I think, and hopefully a lot of value for clients that have been asking us to kind of formalize this approach and show in a kind of more of a casual setting versus a sterile PowerPoint presentation, which we're going to do anyway, but it's good to have a lead in like this. So that's all I have. Thanks a lot, David.
Thank you, Jeff.
Appreciate
Appreciate
your
the
time.
time today. Thank you.